The first city on Earth left behind a written claim that no human being built it. Not a lost legend, not a bad translation, not some fringe channels theory. It's the opening of the oldest poem we have, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and it has been sitting in print for 150 years. It tells you to climb the wall of Uruk, run your hand along the brick, and then it asks you a question. Did the 7 sages not lay these foundations? 7 sages. Not masons, not kings. 7 sages who, the Babylonians wrote, came up out of the sea. So here's what I'm going to put in front of you. The tablet that says it. Who those sages actually were, and why a television network turned them into astronauts. The real technology of the gods. The one the Sumerians wrote out, one item at a time, on clay. How the city got built for real, and the strangest part, which I'll save for the end, where people kept burying those 7 sages for the next 2,000 years. I'm not going to tell you aliens built a city. I've got something better than that. I've got the receipts. You decide what they mean. Let's clear one thing first. No, this isn't the Anunnaki story. If you came for reptilians and a planet called Nibiru, this isn't that video, and honestly, what's really on the clay is stranger. Because here's what I keep coming back to. The bricks are real. The wall is real. The only thing anyone ever borrowed was the credit. And none of this is fringe. Uruk is, to archaeologists, the first true city in the world. Writing itself was invented here, more than 5,000 years ago. The poem I'm quoting is the standard text of Mesopotamian literature, the one every university edition prints. This is the mainstream. It just never reaches you. So hold one object in your head for the next few minutes. A wall, fired brick, laid in a ring around the world's first city. The text says 7 non-human sages drew its plan. I want to know what a person 5,000 years ago was actually trying to tell us when they wrote that down. So start with the place, Uruk. Today, it's a field of broken mud and sand in southern Iraq. A site called Warka. 5,000 years ago, it was the largest thing human beings had ever made. Maybe 50,000 people inside one ring of wall, around 2900 BC. Stop and feel how strange that is. For almost the whole story of our species, you lived and died among a few hundred faces you knew. Then, on one plane, tens of thousands of strangers are suddenly stacked together, eating, trading, fighting, praying. Nobody had ever solved that problem before. There was no manual for a city because there had never been a city, and someone, somehow, built one. The people who lived there left us their own account of how it happened. It's in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest long poem on Earth, and it opens with an instruction. It tells you to walk up to the wall of the city and look closely. In one careful translation, it says, "Go up on the wall of Uruk and walk around. Examine its foundation, inspect its brickwork. Is the brick not kiln fired?" And then, the line I can't get out of my head. Did the 7 sages themselves not lay out its plan? Read that again. The founding poem of the first city does not credit a king with the design. It does not credit an architect. It credits 7 sages. And in the rest of the tradition, those sages are not men. They have a name, the Apkallu, 7 beings from before the flood, made by Enki, the god of fresh water and wisdom. They had the bodies of fish. They came up out of the sea, walked among people and taught them. We even have the pitch in writing. In the 3rd century BC, a Babylonian priest named Berossus wrote the old story down for a Greek audience. He describes the first of them, a creature he calls Oannes. By day it left the water and taught, and I'll read what it taught, because the list is the whole point. In the standard translation, it taught men the skill of writing and mathematics and every kind of knowledge, how to build cities, how to found temples, how to make laws, how to measure and divide the land, how to plant seed and gather the harvest. Everything Berossus says needed for a settled and civilized life. And then this line: since that time, nothing more has been discovered. That's the claim, stated flat. Civilization didn't grow. It was handed over, finished, by something that wasn't human. These are the creatures a television channel later put on screen and called ancient astronauts. And I won't mock that instinct, because look at the source. A thing that comes from the water and hands us knowledge. But the people who actually wrote it down gave it a name, a shape, and a job. And then the Sumerians did something stranger than the fishmen. They itemized the gift. They had a word for it, written M-E, spoken, roughly May. The me are the powers that make settled life possible, not vague blessings, specific offices and crafts. There's a myth, catalogued and translated in Oxford, that lists them out because in the story they get stolen. It goes like this. The goddess Inanna travels to Eridu, the older holy city, the home of Enki. They drink together. Enki, deep in his cups, starts handing her the powers, one after another. She loads them onto a boat, the boat of heaven, and sails them home to Uruk. He sobers up, sees what he's done, and sends his servant to take them back. 6 times he tries. 6 times he fails. The powers stay in Uruk. And when you read what's on that boat, it stops sounding mystical and starts sounding like an inventory. In the Oxford translation, the craft of the carpenter, the craft of the metalworker, the craft of the scribe, the craft of the smith, the craft of the leather worker, the craft of the builder, kingship, truth, the descent to the underworld, more than 100 of them in all, a 5,000-year-old culture, writing down its theory of where technology comes from. It comes from the God City, and it has to be carried one item at a time to ours. So that's their answer. Here's the one we can dig up. The wall was real, and walls need brick, and the ground around Uruk has no stone and almost no timber. What it has is mud, so they learned to shape mud into brick, and for the parts that had to last, they fired those bricks hard in kilns, exactly like the poem brags. They glued them with bitumen, the natural tar that seeps up out of the ground, which also made the work waterproof. That is the real technology that raised the first city: mud, fire, and tar. And one more, the one that actually changed us: writing. We picture the first writing as prayer or poetry or a king's name. It wasn't. The oldest writing in the world comes from Uruk, around 3200 BC, and the British Museum says plainly what it was for. Writing was developed, in their words, as a bookkeeping tool to keep track of bread and beer rations. The first thing our species ever wrote down was not a hymn. It was how much beer it owed the workers. Sit with that. The most powerful tool ever invented, the one underneath this video and every book you've ever read, was invented by accountants to count rations. That is stranger to me than any spaceship. Once you've seen the shape of this story, you start seeing it everywhere. The Greeks said Prometheus gave humans fire, and in Aeschylus, he gives far more. Numbers, the joining of letters, medicine, the reading of the stars. Every art that humans have, he says, came from Prometheus. It's almost a copy of Oannes. The Egyptians gave the credit to the god Thoth, who invented writing. Plato tells the story. And the Book of Enoch, which we covered before on this channel, tells it darker. Heavenly beings called the Watchers come down and teach humanity metalworking, weapons, and the cutting of roots and spells. Same shape, flipped. In Enoch, the knowledge is a crime, and it ruins us. I want to be careful here. Some of these were probably borrowed, one culture copying its neighbor. Some are just the human mind reaching the same picture on its own. I'm not claiming a secret thread between Babylon and Greece and the Andes. Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha, across an ocean in the Americas, those are weaker, and I'll call them what they are. An echo, not a proof. But the pattern itself is the strange thing. Almost every culture that crossed the line into civilization tells the same story about it. We did not make this. Someone gave it to us. And I think I finally understand why. Picture the jump from the inside. Inside 2 or 3 lifetimes, your descendants go from a village to a city of 50,000, with writing, law, and brick temples climbing toward the sky. If you lived through that, would you believe your own grandparents did it? Or would it feel like something reached down and handed it to you? That, I think, is what these stories are. Not a memory of aliens. A memory of a change so fast it didn't feel human. Told by the only people who ever actually pulled it off. Which leaves one real question. All of this is public. The poem has been in print for 150 years. The tablets are catalogued in Oxford, in Berlin, in the British Museum. So why does the version that reaches you always end in spaceships? And never in the truth that's right there on the shelf? I don't think it's a conspiracy. I think it's plainer than that and sadder. The scholars who can read this write for each other in journals nobody else opens. And the people who can hold an audience mostly haven't read the tablets. There's no bridge between them. So the loudest story wins, and the loudest story is the lie. Because the fight here was never really about aliens. It was about credit, about who gets to be the one who gave us fire. Which brings me back to that wall. The poem told you to climb it and run your hand along the brick the 7 sages laid. And here's the part I promised you, the strangest one. People did exactly that for the next 2,000 years. Long after Uruk fell, the Assyrians were still burying little figures of those 7 sages in boxes down in the foundations of their houses and palaces. So the sages would hold the building up. We can prove it. An archaeologist named Anthony Green dug more than 100 of them out of the floors of a single city. One sits in the Metropolitan Museum right now, labeled as found buried under the floor of a palace. Think about what that means. The line in the poem was never just a line. It became a thing people did with their hands. They wrote that the sages laid the first foundations. And then, for 20 centuries, they kept laying the sages into their own. The bricks were real. The wall was real. The writing, the law, the crafts, all real, all ours. The only thing we ever borrowed was someone to thank for it. So, the next time somebody hands you a ruined city as proof of visitors from the stars, you don't have to argue. You can hand them the tablet. It's stranger than the story they came for. It always is. That's where the real investigation starts. Not in the fantasy, in the archive. There's another version of this, by the way. A complete timeline of those so-called visitors. Every date the believers give you, traced back to where it really begins. And it doesn't begin in space. It begins in 1968, but that's the next one.